In this month's episode of Speak Out and Play, I will discuss who are Wargames being made for today. In addition, I will cover the news and happenings of DVG's Warfighter series in Warfighter Corner, what is happening outside the world of Warfighter in the Works, and the coming attractions for February 2026, all on Speak Out and Play. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Speak Out and Play for 2026. Thank you for being here. A new year means, well, everything is new, I suppose. I hope that you enjoyed the holidays and are now looking forward to making this year even more special than last year. Speaking for myself, the unusually warm weather we experienced in December and part of January has allowed me to complete a long list of videos for the year and for next year, but I will get to that later. For those who do not know, my studio where the videos are created is in my garage, and while I have a space heater in the garage, it is no match for the cold, which means that my shooting time is limited when the temperatures are below freezing. I suppose I could either add more space heaters or purchase a much larger one, but there is this thing called circuit breakers, and they're quite annoying when you add space heaters along with the lights, computer, and everything else that's connected to the outlets. So, since I do not want to purchase a mini power plant, I generally find it better just to shoot the videos when the temperatures are at least tolerable with the space heater that I have. Regardless, I have completed all the formal video production for the next several months, save for any new games that I get and want to make a video about. And now with that out of the way, I turn my attention to the first subject of Speak Out and Play for 2026, the current state and future of our hobby, by asking the question, who are Wargames being made for today? For decades, the card and board wargaming hobby knew the exact audience it was serving, an audience of dedicated, unapologetic fans who were often labeled as grognards. For the most part, players who willingly dove into dense rulebooks, spent entire weekends playing a single campaign, and often argued about whether certain games carried enough realism. Complexity was not a barrier for grognards, it was often the point of purchasing the game. Although the origins of print wargaming date back to the 1950s, it really started in earnest in the mid to late 1960s and grew considerably in the 1970s until it peaked in 1980. I know that because I lived through it, when, like most hobbies, fewer new people came in as the same number of people within the hobby were leaving. By 2000, the hobby had shrunk considerably, at least in terms of sales and participation, because of several factors. But today, it's enjoying a renaissance, thanks to the arrival of the internet, crowdfunding, and the rise of independent game companies. We are now awash with many new war games. But the environment today is considerably different compared to where it was 50 years ago. That's because the clear focus of wargaming in the 1970s has now diffused quite a bit. The once singular focus is now being shaped by factors that did not exist at the time. Crowdfunding, YouTube tutorials, and live streams, and arguably most important, the rise of the Eurogame has propelled the advance of mainstream board gaming and has had a powerful effect on the print wargaming hobby. Today, game publishers are faced with a difficult question of just who their wargames are being made for. And can one design a game that can satisfy both older grognards and newer players? Or does that even matter now? Let's begin by breaking down the different types of card and board wargames, or print wargames as I sometimes call them, that are out there, starting with the grognard. The traditional wargamer or grognard is still the backbone of our hobby. That means games that focus on historical accuracy, open decision-making, and how deep study brings rewards for people who best understand the rules and presentation of the game. It also helps that playing time is extended, sometimes lasting for several hours or longer. Since the dawn of print wargaming in the late 1950s, through its peak, as I mentioned before, in the late 70s and early 80s, to even to the end of the 20th century, this form of wargaming has been dominated by map, hexes, counters, and rules focused on what was then the most popular of all wargaming terms, simulation. And while introductory games were also prevalent, changes to that structure of wargaming were relatively few and far between, most notably Up Front by Avalon Hill, a game that I've covered many times on the channel, represented a major change in design, but few examples along this line followed over the decades. Today, the grognard is aging, and I know that every time I look into the mirror, because I started wargaming back in the mid-1970s with Panzerblitz when I was a teenager. And while I left the hobby for some time, I have come back in the past decade or so to explore it once again. And what I see is my generation, the baby boomers and Generation X, understandably tied to the past. And that is a market that is shrinking simply because Father Time has so far remained undefeated, which means that, like it or not, the numbers are going down, which means that publishers who want to stay in business will have to expand or fade away as well. Enter the new generation. Although arguably lesser in numbers, the newer generations of print war games are far more open to systems that are quite different to what it was 50 years ago. The inclusion of card-based, Euro games, and other systems that are aimed more at playability, shorter playing times, and abstraction of elements beyond the main topic instead of adding more detail. Shorter playing times, emphasis on clearly defined roles, greater abstraction, reduced downtime for non-active players in each turn, and the term playability over simulation. Although I could also argue that solitaire is probably the most popular wargaming term at this time. But that is for another video. The upside is considerable in that the modern hobby board game market has embraced Euro games and card-based games since the 1990s. The downside is less emphasis on accuracy, with what could be described as war-themed games, not real war games, mechanics, playability, and emphasis on continued interaction being far more important compared to accurately recreating historical events. Less emphasis on statistics, more emphasis on the immediate gratification of play. This doesn't mean that all younger players are interested in the new approach. Conversely, more mature players are not just focused on the past, but as with any shift in trends, the majority will rule in terms of what publishers will provide. What sells is what's in demand, and what is in demand will be created. But there is another component to the current state of our hobby, something that both generations are engaged with: the rise of YouTube. There is no doubt that YouTube has had a powerful impact on the print wargaming community. You might say that we are in the midst of the YouTube generation. Players who discover both new and older games through video presentations. From unboxings to how to play, playthroughs, and even live streams have changed in many ways how people view games, how they purchase games, and the like. Back then, back in the old days, the first impression focused more on the rules and how the game was presented in print magazines. Today, it is more on how the game appears on video. You can see that in older games such as La Grande Armée that I made a video for on my channel. When you look at that game, it's rather plain looking from a production standpoint. Games of the 1970s had such limitations, especially in terms of colors and graphic detail. And while both paper and mounted maps, counter and card designs, and rule books are still relatively the same, at least in terms of the raw physical quality of them, the advantages of new production methods that create a more colorful appearance have certainly had a more profound effect. As Billy Crystal's Fernando character once said, "It is better to look good than to feel good." I wish I could do a better impression of that, but that's all you're going to get here. And that has helped shape the wargaming environment over the past 15 years or so. The visual impact of sharp, clean counters, exceptional artwork, beautiful colors, and rule books, along with player's aids that emphasize images to explain concepts, has helped transform what war games people purchase today. And that has been added thanks to videos on YouTube. But the impact is greater than just the physical appearance of the game, because video media is more limited in terms of presenting volumes of information compared to print media. The game must have its impact on the potential buyer quickly. Rulebooks today are now shorter. They actually carry less information in terms of turn sequence and details that you saw all those years ago. And they're right to the point. If you cannot properly explain a game on video quickly, then it risks being overlooked. Let's put it this way. You can read far faster than someone can speak. And deep, complex games with loads of nuance mean that videos that provide a proper overview can take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or perhaps over an hour in some cases. And there's not that many people that have that type of patience. Perhaps you do. I don't, but I know there's some people out there, but not as many as there was before. Now, I'm not talking about a generalized description, which perhaps takes a minute or two with all games, no matter their complexity, but a proper overview, coverage of turn sequence, and the relevant mechanics that provide a strong understanding of how the game really works. Because the biggest turnoff to purchasing a game is not being able to understand how it plays. And the longer it takes to explain how it does play, the less likely it is for a person to purchase it, especially given the rising cost of games where taking the plunge means greater risk. Speaking for myself, I have a broad range of interest in terms of historical subjects for games. So when a new game comes around that catches my attention, my first notion is to watch an unboxing video so I can look at the components, see its physical quality, and judge whether I want to go further. And going further means a succinct explanation of how the game plays. The longer it takes to explain it, the less likely I become interested in buying the game. A 5-minute coverage of the basic setup, turn sequence, and how you win is far more attractive to me, at least in terms of a video, than watching a 30 or 45-minute playthrough, at least at this point. If the shorter explanation grabs my attention even further, I might watch a full playthrough, but I will admit that I usually do not. But that's just me. Obviously, you might be different. But I understand that plenty of people love watching long-form playthroughs, and more power to you. Now, I don't have any plans on doing that on my channel because I don't have the time or the patience or any of that. But still, there is no doubt that YouTube has shaped wargaming in ways that are more subtle compared to the arrival of simpler, more play-oriented games. And that factor plays a strong role for publishers in terms of how much emphasis they place on production quality. So, we have the older generation in our interest, the younger generation in their interest, and the impact of YouTube and how it affects the perception of games for both generations. Which brings me back to my original question. Who are war games being made for today? Now, I could give a cop-out answer and say that both generations are equally well served, but the truth is that we are undergoing a slow transformation, which is true in every hobby. The audience for print wargaming is expanding, not so much in terms of numbers, although there's a factor in that, but more along the lines of generational change. As one generation leaves, another takes its place. And while both exist, the types of wargamings are broadening to include both. Of course, you have crossovers with younger players preferring more complex fare, while some older players look for simpler, shorter wargames. But at some point, the overall demand will change. This means that there will not be enough players to fund the older style, emphasis on simulation type of games that were prevalent in the 1970s. And while it may seem like that day is far away, keep in mind that the warning signs will begin with game companies who emphasize that approach, either going out of business or radically changing their focus to appeal to younger gamers. And once that starts happening, the full transition will be very, very quick. It may be within the matter of a few months. I remember, as an example, when VHS tapes dominated the market, and when DVDs came along, they had a small section in retail stores for what seemed like years, growing a little here and there, but the main stock was VHS. And then, boom, almost overnight, DVDs took over. And it was the VHS tapes that suddenly had the small section. And today, DVDs have the small section, with digital downloads and watching films on streaming services being the norm. The same thing will happen in print wargaming. So for now, there are wargames for every taste, both in the old-style map, hex, counters productions and the newer card-oriented Eurogame mechanic and easier-to-play types. And what comes may not be what's rising in popularity now, because with progress comes change, which may create something that no one today can see, not even me. And whether that day is decades from now or right around the corner, the question of who are war games being made for will be answered by who is around to buy the games. And now I'm putting my soapbox away and pulling out a new one to talk about what's new in Warfighter Corner. Not a whole lot is happening in Warfighter this month. I could make some stuff up, but I don't think that's what you want to hear, which is why I made the main topic considerably longer than normal to cover the shortcomings of this section and the next. In terms of news, there are currently 2 Kickstarters dealing in the Warfighter line that have yet to be released. They are Battle Pack number 4 and Warfighter War, the strategic level core set. The former has run into a printing issue, from what I've been able to understand, which has delayed its potential release. I was hoping to see the battle pack, which actually consists of several battle packs, by now, but given the delay and the Chinese New Year, which delays printing production during February, it's probably going to be mid to late spring, hopefully not much later, before we see the contents of Battle Pack 4 arrive, which consist of several expansions that cover the different core sets of Warfighter. Now, as for Warfighter War, it appears to be coming along quite well and is still on target for a midsummer release. When it is released, I will create a unboxing presentation video and present that during the Warfighter week of the following month. Because there is a difference between when the Kickstarter arrives at the backers' homes and when the game is formally on sale. In other words, I've noticed that sometimes there might be a delay of a few weeks or longer before a game actually goes on sale to the general public, as opposed to when the Kickstarter backers get it. But sometimes it's not there. I don't know. But anyway, once I get my hands on it, that's when I'm going to make a new video about it. And then you'll see it the following month, probably on Warfighter Week. In terms of new videos for Warfighter, well, I've already made them for quite some time, at least until the release of the aforementioned Battle Pack number 4 and Warfighter War. Because I've already made the videos for Warfighter Week, which is the second Wednesday and preceding Monday of each month for the year and next year, because I did that because I'm crazy. But that will be the subject of yet another video. And with all things Warfighter being covered for now, it is now time for what is in the works. Let's start this segment by talking about DVG's latest Kickstarter, Merville Battery. So I knew about this last month during the podcast when I hinted that DVG was coming up with a new Kickstarter for January. Of course, I realized at that point that nothing was set in stone until it starts, so I wasn't going to say anything until now. Merville Battery started its Kickstarter campaign on January 6th, and as of this publication of this here podcast, at least in audio form, which, as you know, is the last Friday before the last Wednesday of each month, I just love saying that, the game has been fully funded, and the Kickstarter will end on the 26th or 27th, I guess it just depends, which is before the video version of the podcast. In other words, it's going to end after you hear the audio version of the podcast, but before the video version is released. And the Kickstarter page features a really nifty video that I'm sure some quite handsome and talented fellow has obviously made, but modesty prevents me from going any further in that regard. So here is a basic explanation of what the game Merville Battery is all about. In the hours before the D-Day landing on Sword Beach, a large artillery battery that dominated the area had to be taken out. Your task in the game is to remove that threat and get your men out of the area before it becomes bombarded by the HMS Arethusa. Although there are seemingly similarities, this game is actually not part of the Valiant defense system or series because you are not defending a building or a series of structures or holding a line. Here, your forces are clearly on the attack. This means that you get a new type of challenge. And when the game comes out, I will create an unboxing, overview, how it plays video, so that for those who did not get in on the Kickstarter will have even more information to know whether this game is for them or not. Moving on, in terms of new videos in production, believe it or not, and you probably won't, I have virtually reached the end of video production for 2026. Yes, I realize that we are not quite 1 month into 2026, but that is the way I roll. Since my last podcast, which came out on the last day of 2025, I have created 14 videos, which leaves me just too short of completing the schedule of 52 videos for 2026. And it will remain that way so that when I receive new games, I can create new videos and slide them right in. Now, I have this weird schedule because winter is the time of year when I have the most time to create videos. Once the spring comes, the ground thaws, and the grass starts growing like crazy, I have less time to make the sheer number of videos needed to fulfill my pledge of at least one video per week, which I have kept since this channel started back in April of 2019. So I created a batch of videos last October, one in December, and one this month of January. Although next year I'm thinking of moving the January schedule to February so I can catch a few more games. The only reason I hit the gas this month is that we are experiencing some unusually warm weather. And since my studio is also my garage, it made it a lot easier to shoot videos without freezing to death. Now, with February being the coldest month of the year, that may force me to either move forward or backward my plans for next year, but I will cross that frozen bridge when I get to it. Now, having said that, when I get a new game, I will create a longer video. Well, longer for me, that is, which showcases what it is, how it plays, any new rules, what makes it different, and so forth, like you've seen on my channel for these low 7 years. Oh, boy. Anyway, I do not do formal reviews, but I do focus on the basics of the game, which includes component setup and all that stuff, to give you as unbiased as I can look at the game so you can make the best informed decision about whether it's for you. Now, it ain't a perfect system, I know that, but then again, nothing is perfect, so there we are. And now that I've caught up with everything that is in the works, let's turn to see what videos will be presented for February 2026 on the Seek Out and Play YouTube channel and what I like to call coming attractions. For the first week of February 2026, Seek Out and Play presents a personal essay on Is a Strong Narrative Important in Wargaming? The video explains what a narrative is, how it applies to your gaming experience, and uses two popular games as examples, Warfighter by DVG and B-17, an out-of-print game by Avalon Hill. The second week of February 2026 is Warfighter Week, starting off with an unboxing and presentation of Warfighter Chittor, expansion number 2, Gallup, New Mexico. The video presents soldiers, gear, missions, locations, objectives, and more that is found in the expansion. Followed by a video on vehicle rules in Warfighter Chittor. The video explains in detail the vehicle rules created for the core set and its expansions, so you can decide if using vehicles is something you want to try in your Chittor missions. For the third week of February 2026, Seek Out and Play presents the solo rules for Kingmaker by Gibson Games, a game that was once printed by Avalon Hill. The video covers how the solitaire rules work in the game to give you a better understanding of whether this may work for you. Check out more videos when you subscribe to the Seek Out and Play YouTube channel. In addition, there is a monthly Speak Out and Play podcast, which you can find on Buzzsprout and Spotify. For just $2 per month, you can support the channel by becoming a Patreon member and see the videos and podcast 48 to 72 hours in advance. At least one new video is released every week on the Seek Out and Play YouTube channel, so I will see you next Wednesday. And that's it for this edition of the Speak Out and Play podcast. Thank you for listening. Each audio edition of the Speak Out and Play podcast is released on the last Friday before the last Wednesday of each month on Buzzsprout, Apple, Spotify, and more. A video version is released on the Seek Out and Play YouTube channel on the last Wednesday of each month. Speak Out and Play is a monthly podcast from the Seek Out and Play YouTube channel. Every episode, I talk about wargaming, historical board gaming, the Warfighter series by DVG, games that I have purchased and producing videos for, and the coming attractions of videos that will appear on the following month on the Seek Out and Play YouTube channel. If you have any questions, ideas, or suggestions that you want to see featured on the Speak Out and Play podcast or the YouTube channel itself, please let me know in the comments section. At least one new video is released every week on the Seek Out and Play YouTube channel, so I will see you next Wednesday. And if you see Sally, bring her all the way home.